Hey everyone, this is X and welcome to the third part of my series called Satan Invented Evolution. I wanted to start my video outdoors just because we can look around and see God's marvelous and beautiful creation. I'm making a video series called Satan Invented Evolution, and this is part 3. If you haven't seen the first two parts, go back, check it out, and return right here. We talked about how the Big Bang Theory is a big dud, and how stellar planetary evolution is impossible. This planet could not have formed by random chance. Now we're going to talk about abiogenesis, which is the idea that life can form from non-living material, which has been proven wrong for over 200 years. We're also then going to talk about microevolution and macroevolution. Abiogenesis is the idea that life can form from non-living material, which is also called spontaneous generation, which was proven wrong over 200 years ago. The smallest living cell on Earth has a DNA string of some 1 million pairs of DNA, and it has 600 genes. If we cut this number and just took a quarter of that, we would have a string of some 250,000 base pairs of DNA. That is still a hefty number. The chances of such an arrangement of DNA arising by sheer chance are 4 to the 250,000th power, and that's generous. The number of atoms in the entire universe is said to be about 4 to the 250th power. I would therefore call 4 to the 250,000th power an almost infinitely impossible chance. Note that the supposition advanced that perhaps it was RNA that produced the first life has the exact same problem. The problem, though, is even worse than that. Not only do you need 2 strings of DNA perfectly matched to have life, but you also need a cell so that the DNA code can get the material to sustain that life. It is therefore a chicken and egg problem. You cannot have life without DNA, or RNA if you want to be generous, but one also has to have the cell itself to provide the nutrients for the sustenance of the first life. Add to this problem that for the first life to have been the progenitor of all life on Earth, it necessarily needs to have been pretty much the same as all life now on Earth, otherwise it could not have been the source of all life we now know. What this means is this: the first life forms on Earth had to require oxygen in order for them to be the ancestors of oxygen-requiring life. That's common sense. Now, I'm a fairly simple guy. I'm sure I like science, but it comes to a point where you have to make a decision. Either life formed by chance, or it didn't. Mankind has created some pretty incredible things in their time. We look at some cars, or an airplane, or even your computer screen. Pretty incredible. But we still cannot create life. That in itself, though a very simple analogy, should point you in a rather profound direction. Have you ever heard of Miller's experiment, done in the late 1950s, I believe? It's been repeated a few times, no doubt, but basically his is the most popular, and I'm sure some of you have heard of it. What Miller did was this. He tried to create the 20 essential left-handed amino acids that are required to create life. However, what he ended up doing was creating about 10. You'd think that's impressive, but they weren't all left-handed. They were amino acids, but right-handed amino acids are actually lethal to life. So, he created a mixture of things that were quite lethal. In fact, he created 98% tar, which is of course poisonous to life. Have you ever smoked a cigarette? Miller's experiment, though it set out to show that abiogenesis was possible, actually did the exact opposite. It only made the problem more complicated. He had to exclude oxygen from his experiment because oxygen has a way of destroying the bonds between left-handed amino acids. Also, the idea of abiogenesis and the primordial soup where all life was supposedly came from, well, water has a way, liquid has a way of also ruining the bonds between left-handed amino acids. So the Miller experiments have actually provided compelling evidence for exactly the opposite conclusion. This set of experiments, more than any other carried out by modern science, has done much more to show that abiogenesis is not possible on Earth than it has to indicate how it is possible. Pretty incredible. And even if they did create life in the lab, the only thing that would prove is it takes intelligent life to create life. The complexity of living systems could never evolve by chance. They had to be designed and created. A system that is irreducibly complex has precise components working together to perform the basic functions of the system. A mousetrap is a simple example. If any part of that system were missing, the system would cease to function and die, in case of living animals. Gradual additions could not account for the origin of such a system. It would have to come together fully formed and integrated. Many living systems exhibit this: vision, blood clotting, etc. When you look at a watch, you assume there was a watchmaker. A watch is too complex to happen by chance, yet such living systems are almost infinitely more complex than a watch. They could not be random, they simply had to be designed and created. Evolution flies directly in the face of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. Your car is not going to get more complex over time, it's going to fall apart. This law in physics states that all systems, whether open or closed, have a tendency towards disorder. Adding energy does not help. Adding energy to the roof of your house does not build your roof, in fact it just ruins it. Yet evolution is a building up process, so they say, suggesting that things tend to get more complex and more advanced over time. This is directly opposed to the law of entropy. Evolutionists admit that the chances of evolutionary progress are extremely low, or at very least unobserved. Yet, they believe that given enough time, the apparently impossible becomes possible. If I flip a coin, I have a 50-50 chance of getting heads. To get heads 5 times in a row is unlikely, but possible. If I flipped the coin long enough, I would eventually get 5 in a row. If I flipped it for years non-stop, I might even get 50 or 100 in a row. But this is only because getting heads is inherently possible. However, the chances of me flipping the coin and seeing it sprout arms and legs or go sit in a corner and read a magazine are very, very impossible. So, giving billions of years to the impossible does not make it possible. Great periods of time makes the possible likely, but never make the impossible possible. No matter how long it's given, non-life will not become alive. So, even if nothing exploded and created everything, even if from that nothingness came all the higher elements, and even if the planet formed by itself in its amazing complexity, you'd still have the problem of abiogenesis, life forming from non-living material. Next, let's talk about macroevolution, the idea that one animal can change into another kind of animal, which has never been observed. The Bible makes it clear, every seed and every animal will produce after its kind. Now, what is a kind? How do you define that? Well, the best definition I found is family. That term gets thrown around quite a lot. Now, we all know that the fox, the hound, the coyote, and the wolf are all part of the dog family. We've never seen a dog come from anything but a dog. That makes sense, right? Now, the idea of evolution is a dog came from a rock a few billion years ago. Now you're going to say, no, that's not what evolution says, but yeah, it is. You see, it rained on the rocks for billions of years, and from the rocks came this primordial soup, and from that soup evolved everything we see today. Well, we've never seen a dog give birth to anything but a dog, and we've never seen a dog come from something that wasn't a dog. And that goes for every family of animals. You see, science is defined by things we can observe, things we can test, and things that we can repeat. Macroevolution is not repeatable, not observable, and not testable. By very definition alone, macroevolution is not science. There is a total lack of undisputed examples, fossilized or living, of millions of transitional forms, otherwise called missing links, required for evolution to be true. Evolution does not require a single missing link, but innumerable ones. We should be surrounded by a zoo of transitional forms that cannot be categorized into one particular life form. That has to be a transition between them. But we don't see this. There are different kinds of dogs, but all are clearly dogs. The fossils show different sizes of horses, but they're all clearly horses. None of this is on the verge of being some other life form. The fossil record shows complex fossilized life forms suddenly appearing as if spontaneously created by an intelligent creator. There are huge gaps between fossilized kinds. Darwin even acknowledged that if his theory were true, it would require millions of transitional forms. He believed they would be found in the fossil records, but not one has been. The fact is, many supposed ape men are very clearly apes. Evolutionists now admit that other so-called ape men would be able to have children with modern humans, which makes them the same species as humans. The main species said to bridge the gap, Homo habilis, is thought to be by many the missing link between apes and humans. However, there's never been one found, and there should be millions of them. The body hair and the blank expressions of subhumans in these models certainly are just assumptions of the artists who render them. Virtually nothing can be determined about hair and the look of someone's eyes based on a few old bones. The evolutionary hypothesis needs to find examples of developing organs, those that are increasing in complexity, which of course never have been observed. So we just finished talking about macroevolution, the idea that a dog came from a non-dog, or that a dog can give birth to a non-dog. There is nothing in science that even hints at that being a possibility. So, as far as science is concerned, the first 5 definitions of evolution are purely religious. You have to believe them. However, from a scientific point of view, they are impossible. Now, Microevolution is possible, and we do see it every day. A dog can give birth to a little dog, or a big dog, or a dog with thicker fur or thicker paws. That's totally possible, and it does happen. However, when a scientist or a teacher gives you an example of microevolution, they're going to try and sneak in the other 5, saying that just because microevolution is possible, therefore the others are possible. That is simply not science. There's only one reason to believe in evolution, and that's because you want to suppress the truth and unrighteousness. You don't want to believe in God. You don't want to be accountable to God. You want to be your own God. That's the only reason. You don't believe in evolution because of the evidence. There is no evidence for evolution, and I'll continue to make videos showing you that. This is the end of Part 3. Check Part 4 coming soon. Check the links on the side, and God bless you all.